Your sister's education has to come first, Dad said, refusing to pay for my college. I left quietly that night. 6 years later, my mom begged to reconcile. I still remember the exact moment I realized I wasn't wanted. I was 7 years old, standing in our cramped kitchen, watching my mother fuss over my sister's science project. The blue ribbon they were certain she'd win was already sitting on the counter, a celebration before the victory. "Mom," I said, holding up my own project, a carefully constructed diorama of the solar system I'd spent 3 days making. "Can you help me with this part?" She didn't even look up. Just waved her hand dismissively in my direction. "Not now, can't you see I'm busy with Betty's project? Go figure it out yourself." It was such a small moment, unremarkable really, but sometimes the smallest cuts leave the deepest scars. That night, I sat on my bed and carefully glued the final pieces of my project together, alone, as I had been for most of my childhood. The difference between Betty and me wasn't talent or intelligence. It was simply that she mattered and I didn't. I stared at my completed solar system. It was good, maybe even great, but it didn't matter because no one would notice. No one ever did. Growing up in the shadow of a golden child is like being a ghost in your own home. You're there, but not really, seen, but not truly acknowledged. I became an expert at making myself smaller, quieter, less needy. I learned that the path of least resistance was often invisibility. Betty was everything I wasn't: outgoing, athletic, naturally charismatic. She commanded attention without even trying while I scrambled for scraps of recognition that rarely came. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, a constant reminder that I was the family disappointment, the afterthought, the mistake. By high school, I'd accepted my role as the family scapegoat. When something went wrong, it was my fault. When something went right, it was despite me. My parents attended every one of Betty's soccer games but couldn't be bothered to come to my honors night. They threw elaborate parties for her birthdays while mine passed with barely a mention. I tried, God how I tried, to earn their love. I got straight A's, joined clubs, won academic competitions, but the goalposts kept moving. Nothing was ever enough. The breaking point came during my senior year. I'd been accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship, not Harvard like Betty, but still impressive, something to be proud of. I showed my father the acceptance letter, a flicker of hope still alive that this time, finally, he would be proud. He glanced at it, then handed it back to me with a sigh. "Princeton, that's going to be expensive." He shook his head. "We're already stretched thin with Betty's tuition. Maybe you should consider community college instead." My chest tightened, my hands trembled. The careful walls I'd built around my heart began to crack. "But I got a scholarship," I said, my voice small, "and I could work part-time." My father's expression hardened. "Don't be selfish. Your sister's education has to come first. She's going to do something important with her life. Unlike me." The words hung unspoken between us. That night, my mother found me packing. "What are you doing?" she asked, watching me fold clothes into a duffel bag. "I'm leaving," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. She laughed. "And go where? Don't be dramatic." I continued packing, not looking at her. "I got a job offer from one of my professors, tutoring online. It won't pay much, but it'll be enough." "You're being ridiculous," she said, her voice sharpening. "After everything we've done for you." I finally looked up. "What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Name one thing." She stared at me, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. In that moment, I saw the truth reflected in her eyes. She couldn't think of a single thing. "You've ruined this family," she finally said. "Your sister's worried about her finals, and here you are, creating drama." Something inside me broke, or perhaps it finally mended. The last thread tying me to them snapped, and suddenly I was free. I didn't say another word, didn't need to. I finished packing, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. The first year on my own was brutal. I deferred my Princeton acceptance, unable to afford it even with the scholarship. Instead, I moved into a tiny studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and a shower that only ran cold. I worked 3 jobs, tutoring online, waitressing on weekends, stocking shelves at a bookstore at night. I was exhausted constantly, but there was a strange peace in the exhaustion. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself, not trying to earn love that would never come. No one from my family called, not on my birthday, not during holidays, not once. It hurt at first, the finality of it, the confirmation that I had been right all along, they didn't miss me. But gradually that hurt transformed into something else: determination, resilience, a fierce desire to prove to myself, if no one else, that I was worthy. The tutoring job became my lifeline. I was good at it, breaking down complex ideas into manageable pieces, making the intimidating accessible. My client list grew through word of mouth. One student became 5, then 20, then 100. But the path wasn't without its thorns. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what I was trying to accomplish. I had no safety net, no room for failure. One bad month could mean eviction, one serious illness could derail everything. The isolation was suffocating at times. I'd walk past restaurants filled with families laughing together, sharing stories, and feel a hollowness in my chest that threatened to consume me. In those moments, doubt would creep in. Had I made a mistake? Should I have swallowed my pride and stayed? Then there was the constant battle with imposter syndrome. Who was I to think I could build something from nothing? I had no business degree, no formal training in education, just an intuitive understanding of how people learn and a desperate need to survive. My first attempt at creating an educational website crashed spectacularly. I'd spent 3 months of savings on a developer who disappeared halfway through the project, leaving me with unusable code and an empty bank account. I sat on my apartment floor that night, surrounded by bills I couldn't pay, and felt the full weight of my aloneness. There was no one to call, no one to ask for help, no one cared whether I succeeded or failed. The temptation to give up was overwhelming, to admit defeat, to acknowledge that maybe my parents had been right about me all along. But somewhere in the darkness of that moment, I found a spark of stubborn defiance. The same spark that had carried me out the door 6 years earlier. I wasn't going to let them be right about me. I taught myself to code, stayed up until 3 a.m. night after night, eyes burning from staring at tutorials, fingers cramping from practice exercises. I made mistakes, so many mistakes. The website crashed constantly, payment processing failed, students couldn't access their materials. Each setback felt like confirmation of my inadequacy, but with every failure came learning, with every obstacle, innovation. I built a website, created custom study materials, developed a unique teaching methodology that got results. 2 years after walking out of my parents' house, I had a waiting list for my services and was charging premium rates. By year 3, I had hired other tutors, but managing people brought its own challenges. I had no experience as a leader, no model for healthy workplace dynamics. My first hire quit after 3 months, telling me I was too controlling, too perfectionistic, too much like my father, though she didn't know to make that comparison. The realization shook me to my core. Was I recreating the very environment I'd fled? Had I internalized more than I realized? I spent weeks in a spiral of self-doubt, questioning everything about the business I was building. But unlike my parents, I was willing to change, to grow, to learn from my mistakes. I hired a business coach, joined entrepreneur groups, read every leadership book I could find, and slowly, painfully, I began to develop my own management style, one based on empathy, collaboration, and mutual respect. By year 4, I had launched an online learning platform that was attracting attention from education technology investors, but with that attention came pressure. Suddenly, there were people watching me, evaluating me, waiting for me to fail. The old insecurities roared back to life, the feeling of being judged, the fear of not being good enough, the certainty that once people really saw me, they would reject me just as my family had. I almost sabotaged a major investment deal, convinced they would pull out once they realized I was a fraud. I prepared for rejection, almost welcomed it as a familiar pain. But the rejection never came. Instead, they saw potential in me that I still couldn't fully see in myself. By year 5, I was running a successful company from a sleek downtown office with a view of the city skyline. But success brought its own form of loneliness. I had colleagues, employees, and business associates, but few true friends, few people who knew the real me, not just the polished, professional version I presented to the world. I'd built walls to protect myself, but those same walls kept others at a distance. I was terrified of vulnerability, of letting people close enough to hurt me, of trusting that someone could see all of me and still choose to stay. The scared, invisible girl had transformed into a confident, successful woman on the outside. But inside, there were still shadows of that wounded child, waiting to be found unworthy. I went back to school part-time and eventually earned my degree. I bought a beautiful apartment that felt like home, and slowly, cautiously, I began to let people in, to build friendships with people who saw me, really saw me. And through it all, there was silence from my family, a silence that spoke volumes. Until one morning, 6 years after I'd walked away, when my phone lit up with a name I'd never expected to see again. "Mom," the screen announced. I stared at it, heart pounding. After a moment, it stopped ringing, then immediately started again. 12 missed calls over the next hour, 8 from my mother, 4 from Betty, no voicemails. Then the text started, "We need to talk. Please call us back. It's important. We're in trouble." I set my phone down on my desk, hands shaking. 6 years of silence, and now this. My chest felt tight, my throat dried. I didn't call back. Instead, I went about my day, meeting with my team, reviewing the latest updates to our platform, having lunch with a potential investor. But my mind kept circling back to those messages, to the sudden, desperate need for contact after years of nothing. An hour later, my phone rang again. "Betty." Against my better judgment, I answered. "What do you want?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. "Alex," she said, her voice breaking, "please, we really need to talk to you." "About what?" A pause. "Dad's gone. He left Mom for his secretary last year. We're in a bad place. The house is being foreclosed on. Mom can't work because of her arthritis. I had to drop out of medical school. We have nowhere to go." I closed my eyes, letting the information wash over me. 6 years of silence, only broken by financial desperation. "So you thought of me," I said flatly. "Your family," she said, as if that explained everything. As if those words weren't a cruel joke after everything that had happened. "Am I?" I asked. "Because for the past 6 years I haven't heard a word from any of you, not a birthday card, not a Christmas call, nothing." "We were hurt," she said, her voice small. "You just left without saying goodbye." My laugh was hollow. I told Mom I was leaving. She laughed at me, said I was being dramatic. Silence on the other end. "We saw your company in the news," she finally said. "Mom recognized your picture. You've done really well for yourself." And there it was, the real reason for the sudden reconnection, not because they missed me, not because they regretted how they'd treated me, but because they saw that I had something they now needed. "What exactly do you want from me, Betty?" Another pause. "We need a place to stay, just until we get back on our feet, and maybe a loan for a fresh start." The audacity of it stole my breath. 6 years of nothing, and now they expected me to welcome them with open arms and an open wallet. A storm of emotions swept through me, anger at their entitlement, vindication that after all this time they needed me more than I needed them, and beneath it all a small, wounded part of me that still ached for their approval, for their love. That night I barely slept. I paced my apartment, arguing with myself. Yes, they had treated me terribly. Yes, they had only reached out because they wanted something from me, but they were still my family, the only one I would ever have. Maybe this was an opportunity, a chance to heal old wounds, to build the relationship I'd always wanted but never had. Perhaps their desperation would make them see me differently, value me, finally acknowledge what I had accomplished. The fantasy was seductive. I imagined them living with me, impressed by what I'd built, apologizing for the past, becoming the family I'd always wished for, the mother who would be proud of me, the sister who would be my friend. But as the night wore on, reality set in. People don't fundamentally change, not without deep, intensive work, not without genuine remorse and self-reflection. Their sudden need for me didn't erase years of emotional neglect. Their financial desperation didn't mean they suddenly saw my worth. If I helped them now, I would be setting myself up for more of the same dynamic that had nearly broken me before. I would once again become invisible except when needed, and I deserved more than that. I had worked too hard, come too far to put myself back in that position. No, I said simply, what? I won't be giving you a place to stay or money or anything else. But we're family, she repeated, as if those words were a magical incantation that could erase years of neglect and pain. Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Family doesn't ignore someone for 6 years and then only reach out when they need something. We made mistakes, she admitted, but everyone deserves a second chance. You had chances, I said, thousands of them every day for 18 years. Please, she whispered, we have nowhere else to go. The desperation in her voice tugged at something deep inside me. A part of me was still that 7-year-old girl hopping for approval, for love, for acceptance, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, meaning it, but I can't help you, can't or won't. Her voice had hardened, the vulnerability replaced by a familiar accusatory tone. Both, I said, goodbye, Betty. I hung up, set my phone down, and walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out before me, lights twinkling in the dusk. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, steady, whole. They showed up at my office the next day. My mother, older than I remembered. Betty, her perfect posture now slumped. Both were wearing expressions of practiced remorse that didn't quite reach their eyes. My assistant tried to turn them away, but I told her it was okay. A final conversation. Closure. They sat across from me in my sleek conference room, eyes darting around, taking in the evidence of my success, the success they had never believed I could achieve. You look well, my mother said, her voice tentative. I am well. An uncomfortable silence fell. I didn't try to fill it, didn't offer coffee or pleasantries, just wait. We've missed you, Betty finally said. I raised an eyebrow. Have you? She had the grace to look embarrassed. We thought about reaching out many times, but you didn't. We didn't know what to say, my mother admitted. After the way things ended. You mean after you told me I had ruined the family, after Dad made it clear that my education, my future didn't matter? My mother flinched. We were under a lot of stress then. Your father, this isn't about him, I cut in. This is about both of you. Every time you ignored me, every time you made me feel invisible, every time you chose Betty over me, not because she needed it more, but because she was the one you wanted. That's not fair, Betty protested. Isn't it? I looked her in the eye. When's my birthday, Betty? She blinked, caught off guard. What? My birthday, when is it? She opened her mouth, then closed it, looked at my mother for help. July, my mother said uncertainly. July 18th. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's April 3rd. I lived in your house for 18 years and you don't even know when I was born. They both stared at me, speechless. I know why you're here, I continued. Betty told me on the phone you need money, a place to stay, you need me to save you from the consequences of your choices. We're family, my mother said, echoing Betty's words from the night before. Family helps each other. Family loves each other, I corrected. Family sees each other, really sees each other. You never saw me, not once. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. We both are. We want to make things right. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Them moving in with me, starting over, building the relationship we should have had all along, but the fantasy crumbled as quickly as it formed. I thought about all the nights I'd cried alone, wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't lovable. I thought about the times I'd stood outside Betty's door, listening to my parents laugh with her, wishing I could join but knowing I wasn't welcome. I thought about how they'd never bothered to find out who I really was, what I cared about, what made me happy or sad or scared. And I thought about all the obstacles I'd overcome without them. The website crashes, the funding rejections, the nights I couldn't afford dinner, the panic attacks before important presentations, the loneliness of success with no one to share it with. I had faced all of that alone and I had survived. More than survived, I had thrived. Helping them now wouldn't erase those years of struggle. It wouldn't heal the wounds they'd inflicted. It would only allow them to continue seeing me as a resource rather than a person, a means to an end, not an end in myself. I believe that you're sorry, I said carefully, but I don't believe you're sorry for the right reasons. You're sorry that you need me now. You're sorry that the golden child future you planned for Betty didn't work out. You're sorry that Dad left and the money is gone, but you're not sorry for how you treated me. That's not true, Betty protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. I really am sorry that you're struggling, I said, but I can't help you, not in the way you want. So you're just going to turn your back on us? My mother asked, a familiar note of accusation creeping into her voice. After everything we did for you. And there it was, the mask of remorse slipping to reveal the entitlement beneath. My mother couldn't even maintain the pretense of regret through a 20-minute conversation. What exactly did you do for me? I asked, echoing the question I'd asked 6 years earlier. This time, instead of silence, my mother's face hardened. We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. The basic obligations of parenthood don't count for nothing. You're right, I agreed. They don't count for nothing, but they also don't entitle you to anything from me now. I've built this life for myself without any help from you. I don't owe you a share of it. You always were selfish, Betty said, her voice cold. Always thinking about yourself. I almost laughed at the irony of it. Goodbye, I said simply. I wish you both well, but this is the last time we'll speak. I watched them leave, my mother's shoulders hunched, Betty's steps quick with anger. I waited for the guilt to come, the doubt, the second guessing. It never did. Instead, I felt a profound sense of peace, of completion, the final chapter of an old story closing to make room for the rest of my life. Some might call my decision harsh, unforgiving, but there's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I had forgiven them long ago for my own sake, but forgiveness doesn't mean allowing toxic people back into your life. It doesn't mean subjecting yourself to more of the same treatment that hurt you in the first place. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to close a door, to recognize that some relationships can't be salvaged, that some people will never see you no matter how desperately you want them to.